Did I ever tell you about the mass that Charlotte Tyler and I wrote together?
The closeness, the stillness,
Oh, wonderful.
the seclusion it created once more voluptuous stirring in my blood. Her eyes met mine unflinchingly, not so much coquettish as insistent, inviting, daring, and almost expecting my gaze to repose in her own eyes while she prattled blissfully on. It was the longest encounter I could remember ever having with a white person's eyes. I turned away, swept with lust again, hating her guts, now driven close to distraction by that chattering monologue pitched at a girlish whisper, which I no longer bothered to listen to or understand.
Styron's attempt to imagine a relationship between Nat Turner and the teenaged Margaret Whitehead provoked a storm of protest from black critics.
Nat Turner is one of our great heroes, and we wanted him to be presented to our children in a way that preserved and protected our needs and our necessities. We need to say to our young girls, you're beautiful, you know, your hair's nappy, of course, your skin is black, but you are beautiful, and you are lovable and worthy of the respect of our young men. But how could we say that if our great hero, instead of affirming the beauty of black womanhood, went and affirmed the beauty of white womanhood?
When I got the information from the Book of the Month Club, just reading about the book made me so angry that I tore up the newsletter, flushed it down the toilet, and wrote a letter resigning from the Book of the Month Club in protest against them picking this book.
It got tremendous review. Everybody, all the critics loved it, you know. And this tells me a great deal about attitudes. They themselves had never come to grips with slavery, what it was about.
But not all reviewers lavished praise on the novel. A group known as the 10 Black Writers published a volume deeply critical of Styron's image of the slave rebel.
It's a book that made me particularly indignant because it was so disappointing. Because that finally Nat Turner is going to get presented on the main stage of American culture, and instead of which we get this travesty.
I recall one of my former owners, Mr. Thomas Moore, once saying that Negroes never committed suicide. I recollect the exact situation. Hog-killing time in Moore's puckered, pockmarked face as he labored at the bloody carcass, and the exact words spoken to two neighbors as I stood by listening.
You ever heard of a nigger killing himself? No, I figured, Doctor, he might want to kill himself, but he gets to thinking about it, keep thinking about it, thinking, and pretty soon he's gone to sleep. Ain't that right, Nat?
Yes, sir, Master Tom. That's right. Sure enough. I had to admit to myself that I'd never known of a Negro who had killed himself, and in trying to explain this fact, I tended to believe that in the face of such adversity, it must be a Negro's Christian faith which swerved him away from the idea of self-destruction. But now, as I sit here amid the incessant murmur and the buzz of flies, I can no longer say that I feel this to be true. It seemed that rather my black shit-eating people were surely like flies, God's mindless outcast, lacking even that will to destroy by their own hand their unending anguish.
How would anybody seeking to organize his people to struggle for their own liberation have that perception of them? It was an act of arrogance coming out of a profound ignorance that led him to think he could restructure that experience in anything that would be a credible way, or a way that reflected anything that an informed black person would know of our own experience to make it acceptable to black people.
Novels can be good, novels can be bad. But I think it's different to say that than to say you shouldn't have written this in the first place because you were white, or what are you doing to our history by creating this character about whom we feel deeply ambivalent. And believe me, I think that it was the sexuality of Nat Turner that bugged people the most, no matter how they justified it. I think that without that, the novel would have passed through without a peep.
It was perfect because it was set in the 1st century Rome.
The place where her breast had met my arm was like an incandescence, tingling. Again, I was smothered by remorseless desire. Insanely, I found myself measuring the risk. Take her here on this bank by this quiet brook. Forget your great mission. Abandon all for these hours of terror and bliss.
You should read some of my poetry sometime.
Being attracted to and repelled by members of the opposite sex strikes me as the most natural thing in the world. And to have left that out, to have rendered Turner incapable of that kind of internal struggle, would have reduced his humanity. I think Styron knew exactly what he was doing, and I think he did the right thing.
We have to deal, as black people, with so much of this kind of stuff, not so much in writing, but in our everyday lives.
What Styron had done was play at the worst fears of white America, and I think, frankly, fantasizing in his own mind as a white male about the lustful feelings that black men had for white women. I didn't want a white woman, you know, and I didn't know any of my brothers who did. And but he did, you know, he said that Nat wanted one. And not only did he want one, that he was willing to kill for it. And not only that, that was his primary motivation. Liberation was irrelevant. It was sexual, unbridled sexual lust or something like that.
What really would have caused rage on the part of the black critics would have been, I think, if they had had a consummated sexual relationship, which would really have proved my own racism. But actually, the relationship between Nat Turner and Margaret Whitehead is infinitely more complicated. It's as much filled with rage and hatred on Nat's part than any kind of unrequited love.
Shut your eyes.
I hurt so.
He does at the end realize the horror of having killed this woman out of his rage. And I think that Nat Turner's feeling of love at the end is really an attempt to express his own sense of reconciliation and redemption, and has very little to do with any direct human connection. I think this is an abstraction. At least that's what I was attempting to do. It struck me as a great irony that I began to write Nat Turner the summer of Martin Luther King's great speech in Washington. And it was a time of reconciliation, of nonviolence, of peacefulness, the sense that blacks and whites could work this thing out together. But by the time I finished the novel, in 1967, this sweetness and light that Martin Luther King was predicting had turned into a kind of hellish nightmare on the racial scene. And so Nat Turner appeared, my Nat Turner appeared